I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself here.
Oh, this sounds serious.
Well, I mean, think about what you're doing right now at this exact moment while you're listening to my voice.
Right.
Are you like gripping the steering wheel in traffic? Or maybe you're aggressively scrubbing a pan in the sink?
Or folding laundry.
Yeah, folding laundry, walking the dog, or maybe you're sitting at your desk pretending to look at a spreadsheet while you secretly have this audio playing in one earbud.
Which, by the way, we completely support.
We do, we love it. But whatever you're doing, you are almost certainly multitasking. You're stacking this deep dive on top of another activity because, well, that's just the baseline expectation of modern life now. We optimize.
We absolutely do.
We take every single spare second, every tiny gap of silence, and we view it as this void that just desperately needs to be filled with data.
Yeah, it's like we treat mental downtime as a structural inefficiency, like a bug in the system. There's this ambient cultural anxiety
Yeah.
that if we aren't actively consuming information or learning a new skill or, I don't know, catching up on the geopolitical news of the day, we are actively falling behind.
Oh, 100%.
We've basically framed the act of simply being alone with our thoughts as a missed opportunity for productivity.
And the crazy part is society actually rewards that behavior.
Right.
We call it being a lifelong learner or being highly driven. But today, we are going to look at the terrifying extreme of that optimization.
The absolute tipping point.
Yeah, we are pulling entirely from a single, highly specific source today. It's this intensely vulnerable Japanese essay written by an individual who documented their multi-year battle with, and this is their term, super high-speed listening addiction.
Super high-speed listening addiction. It just sounds intense right out of the gate.
It really does. And I don't mean they just like enjoyed having audiobooks on in the background while they cooked. I mean an obsession so severe that it completely hijacked their early 20s and physically pushed their nervous system to the point of collapse.
And that's really the goal of our deep dive today. We want to explore that specific tipping point. We need to map out the exact moment when genuine intellectual curiosity, which is a very healthy desire to better oneself, obviously,
Sure, yeah.
the moment that mutates into a toxic, all-consuming compulsion.
Right.
And through this author's experience, we're also going to look at a profound warning about our modern subscription economy and how the endless availability of digital content is just systematically clear-cutting our mental white space.
White space. Yeah, we're going to get heavily into that concept later because it's fascinating. But just to give you a teaser of how extreme this gets, we are talking about someone who went to such extreme lengths to consume data that they were making their own passengers physically ill in cars.
Literally sick.
Literally sick. Someone who drank alcohol to the point of blacking out but deliberately kept their earphones in, blasting audio at 3 times the normal speed.
Just trying to force-feed their subconscious mind.
Right. It is a harrowing physical reality. And to even begin to understand it, we have to look at what this compulsion actually looked like in practice during its 3-year peak.
Yeah, the physical manifestation of this is just startling. The author describes this scenario that really anchors the addiction in the physical world, and it involves these long car rides with friends and family.
Okay.
They would connect their device to the car's speaker system
Yeah.
and just play hyperspeed audio. And not just for a few minutes as a joke or a novelty.
Right, for hours on end.
Hours.
Imagine being trapped in a moving vehicle on the highway, and instead of music or conversation, the speakers are just blasting this incomprehensible, fast-forwarded, synthesized voice.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It is. And the author explicitly notes that everyone in the car would complain. Their loved ones would literally say, "Please stop, it's making me sick."
Which makes total sense biologically. The high-speed, unnatural cadence of a text-to-speech robot actually does induce physical nausea in a lot of people.
Wait, really? Just the sound of it?
Yeah, because a human voice has breath patterns, right? It has natural pauses and prosody that our brains use to parse syntax and meaning.
Okay, that makes sense.
When you synthesize a voice and speed it up by, like, 300%, you strip away all those acoustic resting points.
So your brain just can't catch a break.
Exactly. The auditory cortex is bombarded with this relentless wall of sound waves that it can't decode, and that can trigger sensory overload, which leads to physiological distress, like nausea.
Wow. I mean, I struggle to see this entirely as an addiction in the clinical sense, though.
How so?
Well, isn't this just severe crippling anxiety manifesting as a coping mechanism? Calling it an addiction almost feels like it I don't know, absolves the toxic hustle culture that demanded this behavior in the first place.
That's a really fair point.
Because if your own mother or your best friend is sitting next to you saying, I feel physically ill, the baseline human response is to turn it off. But the author writes, and I quote, however, I couldn't stop.
And that right there is why the line between a severe anxiety-driven coping mechanism and an addiction blurs. What pushes this into the territory of a clinical compulsion is that exact inability to stop, despite severe negative social consequences.
Right. The consequences didn't matter.
The text reveals the internal monologue the author had in those moments. It wasn't malice toward their passengers. They describe being literally chased by overwhelming thoughts.
Like what kind of thoughts?
Thoughts like, I must put knowledge in, I must be smart, I must succeed.
Oh, wow. So they were terrified.
Completely terrified. The anxiety created the initial behavior, but the behavior calcified into this automatic survival mechanism. The brain's threat detection system had essentially miscalibrated.
Meaning it thought the audio was keeping them alive.
Essentially, yes. It decided that turning off the audio was a greater threat to their survival than alienating their family.
That is so dark. And the tool they were using wasn't even designed for this kind of intense learning. They weren't using some curated audiobook app.
No, Audible wasn't really a huge thing for them at this point.
Right. They use a specific text-to-speech app called iText Speaker. So they were taking massive blocks of text, dumping it into the app, and letting this robot voice just read it.
Which is brutal on its own.
But the content itself is what really highlights the absurdity for me. They weren't listening to, like, narrative history or engaging biographies.
Okay.
They were feeding the app-dense real estate law, financial news, and high-level mathematics.
Yeah, and listening to complex mathematics via a high-speed synthesized voice is fundamentally incompatible with how human working memory operates.
I mean, I can't even do mental math when someone is talking to me normally.
Exactly. Because when we learn math, or say complex legal structures, we rely heavily on what cognitive psychologists call the visuospatial sketchpad.
The visuospatial sketchpad.
Yeah, basically the part of your working memory that lets you visualize things.
Yeah.
We need to see the equation, understand the spatial relationship between the variables, and process the logic sequentially.
Oh, I get it. It's like trying to appreciate a complex architectural blueprint by having someone scream a list of measurements at you in a dark room.
That is a perfect analogy. You can't visualize the building.
Right, because text-to-speech strips away all the formatting. The paragraph breaks, the visual hierarchy, it's all gone. It's just a flat, aggressive stream of data.
That's pure noise.
So mechanically, how was their brain even processing this? Did they actually retain any of the math or the real estate law?
Well, initially, the author admits it was just a blur. They couldn't catch the words at all.
I would assume so.
But neuroplasticity is a powerful thing. Over time, their auditory processing adapted to the sheer speed of the phonemes. They write that they became accustomed to it, and the words actually began to sound smooth.
Wow.
And they experienced this profound dopamine-driven sense of satisfaction, this feeling that the information was effortlessly flowing directly into their brain.
Well, wait, the feeling of learning and the actual mechanical process of memory retention are two very different things, right?
Completely different. The author estimates their actual retention rate, meaning the knowledge they could practically recall and utilize, was only about 30%.
30%. That is failing.
Miserably failing.
Yeah.
If we think about human memory like computer architecture, the brain's short-term working memory is like RAM, and long-term memory is the hard drive.
Okay, keeping with the tech theme.
The author was essentially trying to write massive encrypted files to the hard drive way faster than the disk could physically spin.
So the data was just getting lost.
Yeah, the data wasn't just blurry, it was structurally corrupted because the cognitive read-write mechanism was completely bottlenecked.
So a 30% retention rate means they are alienating their friends, enduring physical exhaustion, making everyone nauseous, all for a failing grade.
Yep.
The author actually uses a really specific Japanese phrase to describe this futility, right?
Yes, the phrase is karamawari no karamawari.
And what does that mean literally?
It translates roughly to the empty spinning of empty spinning, or more colloquially, spinning your wheels and spinning them again.
Oh, wow.
It perfectly illustrates the immense, agonizing effort of redlining a car's engine while it's in neutral. You have maximum fuel consumption, maximum noise, but zero forward momentum.
Okay, so if the biological cost is so incredibly high and the retention is only 30%, we have to trace this back to the catalyst.
Where did it all begin?
Right. How does a person transition from a normal baseline to requiring a constant high-speed 5e drip of real estate law?
Well, the source text points to a very specific moment of vulnerability that intersected with a very famous billionaire.
Yes. The author explicitly identifies the catalyst as a speech given by Masayoshi Son,
The founder of SoftBank.
right? The founder of SoftBank and arguably one of the most prominent, relentlessly driven billionaires in Japan.
Absolutely.
And the quotes the author pulls from that speech are the absolute epitome of extreme hustle culture. Son bragged, and I'm quoting here, "I was studying all the time, even in the toilet and during meals."
The toilet.
The toilet. And specifically, he said, while driving, I used earphones to listen to recorded lectures and learn.
So there's the blueprint.
There it is. The author hears this, and their brain just locks onto it as the ultimate path to success.
The psychological dynamic here is so crucial. The author writes, I thought, this is it. But, they also demonstrate profound self-awareness in retrospect.
Because they don't blame him, right?
Exactly. They state, Son is not to blame at all. I just went out of control on my own.
Wow, that takes some maturity to admit.
It does. Because the danger isn't simply that a highly successful figure shared their extreme habits. The real danger is how those habits are interpreted by a highly vulnerable psyche.
Right.
A healthy mind hears that speech and thinks, wow, that sounds exhausting, but good for him.
Yeah, like, I'm not doing that.
Right. But a vulnerable mind hears it and thinks, this is the absolute only lifeboat available to save me from drowning.
So what made the author so vulnerable in that specific moment? Why did that speech bypass all their critical thinking and land like this absolute directive from above?
Well, the context is everything. The essay reveals this obsession crystallized right after a catastrophic life failure.
The job hunt.
Yes. The author had failed at university job hunting. And to really understand the gravity of this, we have to understand the Japanese corporate recruitment system, which is known as shokatsu.
Right, because failing to get a job out of college in, say, many Western countries is stressful, but it's not seen as a permanent black mark.
No, you take a gap year, you work a retail job, maybe you travel, and you apply again.
Exactly. But the shikatsu system is different.
Very different. It's this rigid, simultaneous recruiting process for new graduates. Companies hire massive cohorts directly out of university, all at the same time.
So if you miss it.
If you miss that highly structured window, you fall out of the new graduate category entirely.
Oh, wow.
Applying outside of that window often means you are suddenly competing as a mid-career applicant.
But you have zero actual career experience.
Exactly. It is a structural cliff edge. Failing the initial job hunt doesn't just mean a delay in income. Culturally, it can feel like a permanent derailment from the accepted trajectory of a successful adult life.
The author actually describes being hypersensitive to social appearance during this time. They list their specific fears, and it's basically a menu of societal terrors.
It really is.
They feared becoming unemployed. They feared falling off the social rails. They feared becoming a hikikomori or a NEET. We should probably define those because they carry immense cultural weight.
Yeah, we definitely should. Hikikomori refers to a phenomenon of severe social withdrawal. This is where individuals, often young adults, isolate themselves entirely in their homes for months, sometimes even years.
Just completely severing ties with broader society.
Exactly. And NEET stands for not in education, employment, or training.
Right.
In a society that heavily derives individual identity and worth from group affiliation and corporate utility, being labeled a NEET or a hikikomori isn't just about economic hardship.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It is a profound social shame. It implies a total loss of societal value.
And reading the text, perhaps the most agonizing fear they list is the feel of, quote, being a child their parents couldn't boast about.
That one hits hard.
It really does. So when you combine the structural cliff edge of the job market with the terror of social exile, and then throw the weight of parental expectations on top of that, the high-speed listening suddenly makes perfect tragic sense.
It does. The listening wasn't an educational pursuit at all. It was an armor against the perception of failure.
Like a shield.
Right. If the author was consuming data every single second they were awake, they could silence the internal narrative that called them a failure. They could point to the sheer volume of their consumption and say, look how hard I am working, I am preparing, I am not falling behind.
It's like performative productivity, but for an audience of one.
Exactly.
The noise of the synthesized voice was literally used to drown out the silence of their own perceived inadequacy.
That's exactly it.
But as we see in the text, that armor very quickly mutated into an inescapable prison. And it led to a severe physical and nervous breakdown.
Yeah, the author details how this compulsion just colonized every single corner of their daily routine. It didn't stop in the car.
Where else did they do it?
They listened during their commutes. They listened while completely submerged in the bath.
In the bath.
Yes. They listened right up until the exact physiological moment of sleep. The earphones basically became a permanent physical appendage.
They actually used the word digestion repeatedly in the essay, which is such an unappealing way to talk about learning.
It sounds so clinical.
It does. They say it became an obligation to layer digestion upon digestion. It sounds less like intellectual curiosity and more like this biological imperative they just couldn't control.
Right.
You finish one incredibly dense legal text, you delete it, and instantly hundreds more are queued up, just demanding to be digested.
And the mechanical consequence of that constant processing is severe neurological exhaustion.
I would imagine so.
The human brain is not a continuous processing engine. It requires what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or DMN, to activate.
Okay, the default mode network, what does that do exactly?
The DMN is essentially the brain's resting state network. It turns on when we are not focused on the outside world.
Like when you zone out.
Exactly, when you're daydreaming or taking a shower in silence or just staring out a window on the train.
And the DMN isn't just the brain being lazy, right? It's actively doing critical maintenance.
Precisely. The DMN is absolutely essential for consolidating memories, processing emotions, and integrating new information into our existing worldview.
Oh, wow. So you need it to actually learn.
You do.
Ah.
By forcefully piping 3x speed audio into their ears every waking moment, the author was effectively suppressing their default mode network for 3 entire years.
That is horrifying.
The hippocampus never had the silent space required to actually transfer that real estate law or mathematics into the cerebral cortex for long-term storage.
So that is mechanically why their retention rate was only 30%.
That's exactly why. They were denying their nervous system the very silence it literally needed to learn.
And when a nervous system is pushed to that absolute brink, it naturally looks for a chemical off switch.
It has to.
And for the author, that off switch was alcohol. But the way they utilized alcohol is honestly the most disturbing revelation in the entire text for me.
It's very grim.
They didn't drink to relax, take the earphones out, and just chill. They drank to push the audio even deeper.
Yeah, they described their alcohol consumption skyrocketing during this period. They would drink heavily, deliberately aiming for a blackout state.
Deliberately blacking out.
Yes, yet in this state of severe intoxication, they would leave the earphones in, still blasting the high-speed audio.
What is the biological rationale there? I mean, if you are unconscious, you cannot parse syntax. You definitely can't process math.
Well, the author provides their logic, and it really shows the total collapse of their rational boundaries. Even as they were blacking out, they held on to this pathological belief. They write, "I will pound this into my subconscious mind while I am sleeping."
Pound this into my subconscious. That language is actively violent.
It is. It's psychological self-harm.
It really is. They viewed their own conscious bottleneck, the fact that their brain was just too exhausted to learn normally, as a weakness that had to be bypassed through chemical force.
It is the absolute zenith of the compulsion.
Yeah.
The initial, somewhat rational desire to be competitive in the job market had completely warped.
It wasn't about the job anymore.
No, it transformed into a self-destructive punishment for their perceived inadequacies. They write that their 20s were defined by an overwhelming difficulty in living, or ikizurasa.
Isuras.
Yeah, and they developed this grandiose, desperate fantasy of becoming a polymath, like an untouchable genius who would leave their name in history.
Just to create a buffer.
Right, a buffer so large that society could never again threaten to leave them behind.
But that jump from, I don't want to be unemployed, to, I need to leave my name in human history, is a massive psychological leap.
It's huge.
Where does that theatrical existential pressure even come from? Because the essay doesn't just start in their 20s. The author forces us to look back at their origin story to understand the blueprints of all this anxiety.
Yeah, the text takes us back to their high school years, detailing a deeply vivid incident that proves this internal pressure cooker was boiling long before the university job hunt.
Yes, the Coco Chanel incident, we have to walk through this because it is such a stark illustration of masking trauma.
It's quite a scene.
So the author is in high school, and they are hiding in a bathroom stall. They're crying so intensely, they were literally hyperventilating.
Just completely breaking down.
Yeah, the sheer weight of having to become a quote-unquote great person. is literally crushing their respiratory system. And a teacher hears this and intervenes.
Now, you can imagine the teacher's perspective here. You find a student in the throes of a severe panic attack. You prepare yourself to hear about, severe bullying, a crisis at home, maybe an academic failure.
Right, something typical for a high schooler. But the author looks up through their tears and just wails. I want to be a person who lives on even after leaving this world, like Coco Chanel.
I mean, what do you even say to that?
The author notes that the teacher was just completely bewildered. They just murmured, like, oh.
They lacked any framework to process that level of historical, existential ambition pouring out of a teenager in a restroom.
Totally. But the vital part of this anecdote is what happens the very next minute.
The masking.
The masking. The author doesn't go to the school counselor. They wipe their face, walk out of the bathroom, return to the classroom, and instantly become the loudest, goofiest class clown in the room.
A total 180.
They describe it as going wild with goofiness.
And the author reflects on this extreme whiplash and actually questions their own neurobiology. They ask, retrospectively, was I a multiple personality? Was it bipolar disorder, developmental disorder?
Because it's such a drastic shift.
They recognize that swinging from suicidal-level existential dread to hyperactive entertainment in a matter of seconds is a severe fragmentation of the self.
It's the ultimate pressure cooker. The fear of not being immortalized in history is boiling inside, but society demands normalcy, so they clam the lid down and aggressively perform happiness so nobody looks too closely at the structural cracks.
That's a great way to put it.
But who built that pressure cooker? Like, who convinced a high school student that anything less than historical immortality was a failure?
Well, the text points directly to the tragedy of the parent dynamic.
Ah, of course.
The author excavates their deep-seated childhood trauma,
Yeah.
which basically served as the engine for all the subsequent anxiety. They describe a childhood fundamentally characterized by a sense of loss. They write, "A childhood where I lost something important."
And their primary memory of their parents is that they were always suffering and that the author was constantly belittled by them. But the author noticed a specific loophole in their environment. While they were belittled, they observed that people who possessed high specs, meaning elite academic credentials, prestigious titles, extraordinary intelligence, those people were met with awe and admiration.
Because a child's developing brain operates on very simple survival-based logic.
Right.
The logic formulated was, I am belittled and my parents are miserable. Society reveres high specs. Therefore, if I acquire the absolute highest specs imaginable, if I become an undeniable genius, I will finally secure my parents' admiration and perhaps cure their suffering.
It's sad because that's such a pure, childlike motivation at its core.
It is.
But the text reveals that this was a rigged game from the start. It was an impossible emotional architecture. Which brings us to the paradox of parental approval, which is one of the most painful realizations in the entire essay, in my opinion.
Yeah, in psychology, this is known as a double bind. It's a concept developed by Gregory Bateson.
A double bind. Okay, what does that entail?
It occurs when an individual receives two or more conflicting messages, where one message negates the other, making a successful response literally impossible.
Okay, so you're trapped either way.
Exactly. And the authors sensed a highly toxic, unspoken atmosphere from their parents.
The parents demanded success, but the author realized, and I'll quote again, there was no meaning unless the parents themselves became great, and if only the child became great, they would be even more troubled.
The implicit message was, succeed so that we can validate our parenting, but do not succeed to a degree that highlights our own mediocrity and makes us feel inferior.
I mean, how does a child navigate that? If you're average, you're belittled for failing. If you achieve extreme success, you alienate your parents and cause them psychological distress.
The finish line is booby-trapped.
Exactly. So what is the coping mechanism? You just keep running, you keep striving, you keep feeding the text-to-speech app at 3x speed, trapped in a perpetual state of becoming, because actually arriving at success is dangerous.
The high-speed listening was the perfect symptom for this double bind.
Oh, because it never ends.
Right. It provided the exhausting sensation of massive effort and forward momentum, satisfying the demand to work hard, while the 30% retention rate ensured they would never actually reach that threatening level of true mastery.
Wow.
It was a perfectly balanced, self-contained system of suffering.
That is just... It's brilliantly observed by the author, but so heartbreaking.
It really is.
So, having mapped the anatomy of this personal nightmare from the neurological bottleneck of the app to the cultural terror of being a NEET to the psychological double bind of their childhood, the deep dive really shifts here.
It pivots into a broader societal critique.
Yes, because the author makes it very clear they are not just recounting personal history, they are issuing a warning about the present.
The author explicitly notes that their harrowing experience took place in an era before Audible and the massive proliferation of audio subscription services.
Right, they had to manually copy-paste text into a robot reader.
Exactly. So they view their pre-Audible brute force addiction as a harbinger. They were basically patient zero for a pathology that is now being slickly packaged and sold to millions of people for a flat monthly fee.
This is the illusion of the subscription model. The author argues that modern corporations are actively exploiting our deeply ingrained, vulnerable desire to learn and be productive.
And they are targeting a very specific territory to do it.
Yes, they identify the battleground as our white space or empty space.
The terms used in the Japanese text are yohaku and kuhaku.
Yohaku and kuhaku.
These represent the transitional, quiet moments of human existence. The time spent walking to the train, washing the dishes, staring out a window.
The exact moments we talked about at the very beginning of the show.
Exactly. Moments when the hands and eyes are occupied, but the auditory channel is wide open.
And corporations view that white space not as a necessary biological resting state, but as, like, undeveloped real estate.
Prime real estate.
The author warns, companies are steadily closing in on our white space and empty space. Think about how aggressive the marketing is now. Turn your commute into a classroom. Read a book a day while doing laundry.
It is the literal colonization of the mind. Just as physical public spaces were slowly commercialized over the last century, our internal cognitive space is now being commercialized.
I never thought of it like that.
And the insidious nature of the marketing is what the author points out. The messaging is, because your hands aren't free, learn by ear. Because you can't open your eyes, learn by ear. It's actively framing the absence of data as a waste of time.
But what if that empty space isn't a vacant lot waiting to be paved over with, like a Spanish language podcast? What if the silence is the actual destination?
Exactly.
The author emphatically argues that happiness exists within that very white space and empty space, but the corporate ecosystem sells us fake happiness.
Kurisam no shiawes.
Right, the fleeting dopamine hit of completing a module or finishing an audiobook at 2x speed.
And to ensure we keep returning to that fake happiness, the subscription model leverages a very specific psychological vulnerability. The author breaks down the mechanism flawlessly. It triggers what they call a loss emotion, or sanshitsu kanju.
Okay, in behavioral economics, we call this loss aversion, or the sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly.
The human brain actually processes the loss of resources, like money, with the exact same neural circuitry used to process physical pain.
Yes. And the author states, because I have gone to the trouble of making a contract, it's a waste.
I feel that all the time.
We all do. When you pay a monthly fee for unlimited information, your motivation flips. You are no longer listening out of genuine curiosity or joy. You are listening out of a physiological fear of wasting your investment. You listen to recoup the cost.
It's the buffet mentality applied to the human intellect.
The buffet mentality, yes.
You pay for the all-you-can-eat buffet, and you just gorge yourself until you feel physically sick. Not because the food is good, but because you need to ensure the restaurant doesn't win the transaction.
Exactly. The author observes that we digest until we profit.
Which leads to the ultimate tragic reversal of the modern information diet. The author concludes that this ecosystem puts the cart before the horse regarding happiness and unhappiness.
That's a total paradox.
We enter into these subscriptions to feel fulfilled, to become well-rounded, complete individuals. But the sheer volume of available content, combined with the loss aversion of the monthly fee, ensures we are trapped in a perpetual state of lack.
We feel guilty for the podcasts we haven't played.
Right. We feel anxious about the unread articles in our queue.
The very tools designed to provide intellectual fulfillment become engines of inadequacy.
It's so twisted. The author notes that companies take our healthy curiosity and twist it, causing our greed for knowledge dependence to run wild.
Now, the author is careful to concede a caveat here. They do state, if you can do it moderately, it's good. They acknowledge that audiobooks and podcasts obviously have immense value.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
But they immediately counter their own caveat with the reality of human behavior in a commercialized ecosystem. Because you can't do it moderately, it's an addiction. The system is literally designed to bypass moderation.
So how did they escape? If the system is designed to trap you, and the compulsion is tied to deep childhood trauma, how does the author finally find the silence again?
The resolution was not a gentle fading away. It was an abrupt, highly painful severing. The author ultimately forced themselves to delete the app.
Cold turkey?
Cold turkey. And the physical response was severe. They write, "When I deleted this app, I was tormented by considerable pain." They experienced legitimate, agonizing withdrawal symptoms.
I mean, when you have suppressed your default mode network for 3 years with 3x speed audio, suddenly allowing the brain to sit in silence must feel deafening.
It must have been overwhelming.
All the anxieties, the trauma, the fears of being unneat that the noise was masking, they all suddenly rush back in.
But they endured it. They write that they overcame it. They survived the neurological withdrawal and actually broke the cycle of compulsion.
Which brings us to the author's final message. It is a profoundly gentle plea for the reader's well-being. They ask us to audit our own lives, to look at the services we subscribe to.
Yeah.
They ask, are the services I join for fulfillment actually bringing about a sense of lack? And if the answer is yes, they offer a very simple, albeit difficult, piece of advice. It might be good to cancel the contract.
It's a vital call to reclaim our cognitive white space, to recognize that we don't need to constantly digest the universe to be worthy of existing within it.
Beautifully said.
The author concludes the essay by wishing the reader calm and healthy days. And, coming from someone who spent their early 20s trapped in a self-inflicted hurricane of high-speed robot voices, that wish for calm carries immense weight.
It really does. We started this deep dive by asking what you are doing right now, at this exact moment. Are you multitasking? Are you filling the gaps?
Most likely, yes.
After tracking this incredible journey from the childhood double binds to blackout drunk speed listening to a brilliant takedown of our subscription economy, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought based on the author's warning.
Let's hear it.
If we actually took the advice, if we canceled the contracts, took out the earbuds, and completely shut off the constant high-speed stream of information we pump into our heads, are we actually terrified of what we might hear in our own silence?